on the other one, you bastard!
Regardless of what time you started collecting, there's always going to be something that you missed. Sometimes a figure came out before you were born, others you were just taking a break from collecting, or maybe at the time you weren't in the best financial position and you had to temporarily skip a figure. This is where back collecting comes into play, and there are many methods to do so. Yoink! Occasionally you'll want a figure so bad that you will hunt it down with all your might. However, under most circumstances you'll just be browsing around the forums and the Facebooks and the Twitters, just seeing what good deals you can find. The problem is, sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes you don't do enough research. And when that happens, no matter how good of a deal you think you're getting, you're actually getting the short end of the stick. Greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Platinum Edition Prime Beast Hunters Leader Class Weaponizer Ultra Magnus. Wow, that's a mouthful. Now before we begin, I suppose I should go into detail about what exactly Platinum is. Bear with me though, because explaining their stupidity might take a while. Essentially, they were a sort of collector-oriented subline that released supposedly premium redecos of existing figures. I say supposedly because a lot of the time they were pretty goddamn stupid. So you know how the Generation Selects figures actually make sense, because they're all obscure characters that only collectors are interested in. Hell, remember how Takara premium lines were aimed at adult collectors in Japan, and that made sense because they had higher quality paint applications? Same goes for FunPub as well. Yeah, Platinum didn't really get the memo for what constituted good deco ideas, and often ended up taking some of the best molds Transformers had to offer, and ultimately ruins them with ridiculous design choices. For every Horsemus Prime, there were 35 chrome-riddled Dinobots. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we found the point where you get too much chrome. And if that wasn't enough, they were also in charge of reissuing classic G1 figures in the West. Unlike the current Walmart reissues or the older Encore reissues, these were built terribly. Aside from the already bad stickers, the plastic quality was awful, the tolerances were shit, and although my copies have been fine, there was rampant paint chipping across the board. And that's not to say they weren't free of their awful deco choices either, because oh dear, seriously, Walmart's reissues might be prohibitively expensive in some instances, but Jesus Christ, I'll take that over the alternative any day. So with all their f***ery, I suppose it's no surprise that they only lasted 5 years before quietly fading into obscurity. In 2018, Hasbro pulled back on the collector redeco concept, which was probably for the best given how awful 2018 was for figures, before we finally got the quite awesome Generation Selects line that persists to this day. Unfortunately, I didn't do any research on Platinum before purchasing this off the Facebook Marketplace, and right out of the box, my disappointment skyrocketed. But before that, in vehicle mode, dear, that's just, wow. Like, remember when vehicle modes were supposed to be cohesive? Alright, of course you do, because that's been the basic fundamental of Transformers since Generation 1! I think this might be one of the worst alt modes I have ever come across, period. For all the frustrations people have of the upcoming Studio Series Satellite Soundwave, at the very least they're not hiding under the pretense of a proper Earth-based vehicle mode. There's some respects to be had with that shamelessness. This is just a hodgepodge! Like, on its own, this alt mode is awful, but the subtle glimpses of what it's meant to be quadruples that frustration. For those unaware, Ultra Magnus is a retool of Weaponizer Optimus Prime. However, the team that was in charge of retooling this has given practically no effort to the retool process. A good retool can take an already awesome mold and revitalize it, making it feel wholly different from the original. Here though, the designers clearly didn't give a shit. I mean, I guess the front of the vehicle mode looks kinda good. It at the very least looks like a truck, since it was the one element of the vehicle mode that was left untouched. The white paint is done remarkably well, although the yellow is a smidge messy. To be fair though, yellow paint is extremely hard to do. Same for the red though, it ends up looking incredibly dull against the blue plastic. It really should have been given an extra coat, given that this is supposed to be a premium piece. Oh, wow, I couldn't even spend 10 seconds being positive before I started complaining. Well, I guess there's no putting off the inevitable. Let's take a shot at the elephant in the room. The back section is wholly unfinished. Legitimately, this doesn't even look like an official product, or a poorly done third-party piece. This looks like something a kid would cook up in Google SketchUp over the course of an afternoon, but he never finished it properly because he's grounded for taking heroin in the school bathroom. First off, the shoulder pads really haven't been thought out properly, so they just sit on the side of the vehicle mode, destroying any sense of aerodynamicism. Funnily enough, they've put a whole lot of effort into making sure these sit flush against the sides of the vehicle mode, but why? You've got all this space back here for them to fold into, yet nothing does. The Voyager had no trouble re-engineering this section, and they weren't even using the superior first edition version. They were using the Robots in Disguise edition. Yes, that was the tagline for the first part of Prime. Confusing as ever, I know. Then moving further back, you've got the faux chest just sitting there, not giving a shit. Unlike a lot of reviewers, I don't mind faux parts as a concept. There have been plenty of figures that feature faux parts that have turned out extremely well. Personally, I don't get their hatred, especially if they're done in a way that makes the transformation more fun. And funnily enough, the original molds did these properly. On the original, these transformed somewhat similarly to the Evasion Optimus transformation scheme, folding inside out onto the back of the truck cab. The problem is that they've pushed the supposed screen accuracy so far that now these physically can't transform properly. The hinges were originally supposed to fit all the way into the back of the trucks and tab into each other again, but since we now have to deal with the side parts he had in the show, it's basically impossible. These are now forever left just to sit on the back of the truck, teasing you with how they line up with the back legs, as if the designers always intended this to be the case. Also, my copy doesn't transform properly, as one of the tabs that locks it into place is lopsided, meaning they're permanently misaligned. Gee, great, it's almost like this figure hates me or something. And it's not just new faults that make this figure bad. Oh no, there are plenty of awful areas from the original that make it even worse here. The truck bed is a complete joke. When you combine hollowness with exposed robot parts, you really do get an unholy combination. It's made even worse by the lack of back windows, so instead of having half visible arms, the whole arm section remains in view. Now, with that being said, there is a way to fix this. He does come with the Forge of Solus Prime, or for those who haven't seen the show, a big f***-off hammer. The sculpting is alright, but the paintwork is just lazy. The blue on the middle section is, again, incredibly dull. It really needed an extra coat. And the gears, man, they didn't even try. You've got so much copper bleed on show here. I suppose as an accessory it's passable, but for such a pivotal part of the show it really feels shameless. That being said, when you plug it into the back, it does cover up a lot of the arms and hollowness from the back legs. However, in the process, the vehicle mode cohesion is made even worse. Under normal circumstances, weapon storage is either really clever or just kinda passable given the circumstances. This is neither. They're trying to be clever, but it ends up making the alt mode look even uglier than it already did. And was this the entire reason why the windows don't fit in properly? Was it to facilitate this awful weapon storage? Shame on you, designers. Shame on you. And capping everything off, thanks to the new deco, the red plastic on the sides is hella distracting. Normally it shouldn't be, but because the whole vehicle mode is a mess, it ends up being far more noticeable. If this alt mode wasn't too bad, I could easily forgive this small issue, and the same goes for the hollowness at the back. But when you get the shameless pieces of kibble on the side, all goodwill dries up in an instant. Seriously, it's so kibbly that I often get confused between this and the dog's breakfast. That being said, the gimmick at the very least is quite cool. It's disappointing that you have to untap the grill in order to get it to work, but the flip-out guns are quite a satisfying feature. With them fully extended, this guy could almost pass for a Stealth Force figure. Almost. Unfortunately, the remaining cavity just ruins the illusion. The gimmick itself is quite nice, but unfortunately it's not enough to save the figure. It's somewhat funny to think that last week I reviewed a figure with the best robot mode I've seen all year, because this right here is easily the worst vehicle mode I've seen all year. It's also very close to being the absolute worst alt mode in my collection, but I can't really say that with absolute certainty since a lot of it remains in storage. It has to be in the top 3 at the very least. The main reason can be seen why when you compare it with a more recent figure, Studio Series Roadbuster. This figure is, to be quite frank, awful. Especially in vehicle mode, the build quality and transformation are dog shit. At the end of the day though, the aesthetic is at the very least consistent. There's a careful balance of Cybertronian and Earth details. With Ultra Magnus, there's no balance. There aren't Cybertronian bits and Earth bits, there are robot bits sticking out that ruin the flow of the figure. Under normal circumstances, I'll easily take a solid vehicle mode over a visually appealing alt mode any day, but the design of this alt mode is so bad that it completely breaks my rule. It feels unfinished, and especially for a leader class figure that transforms into an often trodden vehicle mode, that's pretty pathetic. Matter of fact, my hypothesis is that this figure was originally intended for the Prime Beast Hunters line, but was cancelled due to how unfinished it was, then revived in the Platinum line. If this was true, then plenty of oddities pertaining to its existence would make sense, such as the fact that Platinum doesn't really have the authority to commission new figures. Their entire lineup consists of redecos, except for Magnus over here. Furthermore, Magnus wasn't just never released in the Prime line, but after his release, several redecos of the original debuted. Prime had access to the mold, but outright refused to release it. None of this is definitive, but if this is true, then it honestly would have been better off remaining cancelled. This hypothesis is further supported by the box art. Now, usually I don't discuss the box art since I typically just throw the packaging away. However, in this instance, the listing retains the box, and I feel it's important in showing how sneaky the Platinum team was. On the front, you've got some lovely artwork. That's the robot mode shown. On the side, you've got more artwork. That's, yet again, the robot mode. You open up the flap and you get a repeat of the artwork from the side, as well as a display of, you guessed it, the robot mode. With the existence of the flap, people are less likely to pay attention to the back of the box, which is the only place where you can actually see the vehicle mode. Furthermore, the saturation is turned up so high that you can barely see the blue section sticking out. And in every instance, they photographed it so you can't see the god-awful kibble from the back. It's highly likely the marketing team knew that they had a stinker on their hands, so they deliberately tried to hide all the blemishes through the photography process. From a legal standpoint, I doubt there's anything wrong with that, but f*** me if this is the case, these bastards are slimy. I am fully at fault for not doing my research on this figure in the first place, but as a kid when I saw this on shelves, I had no clue about it. All I thought was, oh shit, it's Ultra Magnus. If I was still into Transformers, I'd totally get that. Fortunately, I was really into Warhammer at the time, so I didn't pay full price. But still, kids and even adult collectors, who Platinum is somewhat marketed to, are pretty much being deceived by the box art. That's what really pushed this figure over the edge for me. Platinum most likely knew what they were doing, and it disgusts me. On principle, whether this is the worst vehicle mode I've come across or not, it's definitely the one I hate the most. No malice to the seller who sold me this, but definitely f*** the Platinum team for pulling a fast one. Allegedly, this is just a hypothesis, and I can't really confirm any of this, but god damn it, I know in my gut it's true! Moving on though, size-wise, he's in the sort of in-between stage of leader class figures, where the budget was slashed, but Hasbro hadn't really figured out that they could just make these figures smaller instead. Between this and the modern leaders, I'll easily take supposedly overpriced Voyagers any day. Same goes for the many figures of the Prime Wars trilogy. If it's a choice between those and Astro Train, give me a Choo-Choo Bastard 24/7. Anyway, I'm pissed at this alt mode. I don't want to talk about it anymore, so please, for the love of God, get me out of here and into the transformation. Much like the alt modes, the transformation between the two modes just feels unfinished, because it literally is. You can't transform it properly due to the incredibly shitty retooling they've done here. As such, you kind of go through it feeling like there should be something more, and yes, there should be something more, but you'll never actually get to do it, so it's incredibly f***ing stupid. If the hammer is installed, pull this up, yank it out of there, and then yank the whole thing out of there. Then the first thing to transform you want to do is actually take the arms out of here and unpeg them like so, and of course you can bring out the feet and untab the legs. The gimmick does work in robot mode, but you have to untab this and kind of rotate it towards the back, with of course that section folding up as well, and then it just kind of sits on the back there. Come underneath and pull up the head, come to the top here and untab these. Oh, there! That happens sometimes when you transform it. Sometimes the gimmick goes off, and if you do, you just pull it back down. But as I was saying, you want to take these shoulder spikes up and kind of untab them. You want to untab everything from this kind of part here, bring up these sections like so, they'll untab from the sides. Bring these out a little bit as well. That'll give you enough clearance to bring them up. And you want to bring this all the way over and around over the arm. And of course, cap it off with that section sliding out slightly. And then, oddly enough, you've actually got a slot there and a tab there. And this all pegs together. It's actually quite important if you want to have everything locked in place. From here, you want to make sure this is all the way up, because then these actually go in here and lock the head into place. But if you don't do it properly, that's just going to sit down there and it just flops around. So bring this up properly, lock that into place, and that tab's in there, and it should all come together like so. Last but not least, orient the arms properly by bringing the wrists into their correct position. And the end result is just... it's not that great. I wouldn't say the robot mode is as bad as the vehicle mode, but... I just don't feel anything from this. In robot mode, well, are you a fan of lukewarm porridge without any honey or jam or anything on top? Well, that's essentially what this guy feels like. The most mediocre out of anything mediocre. Essentially, every element of this figure feels half-assed to some extent, and a lot of it could have easily been fixed. First off, the head sculpt is just off for some reason. It's pretty close to the original screen model if you put them side by side, but in person, something just feels underdone. I really wish I could put my finger on it, but I can't really criticize one key element that makes the head sculpt suck. It just kinda does. I can criticize the messily painted eyes and the dull red they used. Seriously, the red does not pop at all on this figure. The worst offender is easily the shoulder stacks, with these big red blocks essentially conveying the emotion of dull surprise from every angle. I didn't know it was possible to convey such an emotion, let alone from a splotch of paint, but this figure continues to surprise me in the worst possible ways. Said shoulder armor also makes it incredibly difficult to get the arm out. Thanks to the way he transforms, you end up with this ridiculous panel in the way, so you quite literally have to disengage the entire piece just to get proper posability. Not that it's worth it considering the cohesion in the shoulder decided to f*** off for the week. Then you get to the chest where the hollowness behind it is completely visible through the windows. That would have been fine if the windows had their own mechanical detail similarly to the Siege version and, look, the original actually had these painted. But nope, much like the soul of this figure, the heart remains a cavity of hollow plastic. Yes, he and Ectotron are quite similar. The side windows too, which I suppose are a subtle callback to Movie Prime, don't really look that good anyway. Considering these two are what essentially new to the transformation, they really aren't aren't worth it, especially with their awful blue paint. These really make the windows look tacky, although not as tacky as the midriff. I don't know who thought making it mostly white was a good idea. Putting screen accuracy aside, it just looks awful. But that's not the main issue. Oh no. I think you can pretty easily tell he has a micro p***. Seriously, this thing looks redonkulous. I do have to admit the gimmick is actually really cool, and on the original toy it must have been a pretty fun feature to have. But of all the tabs to use, a curved member? Really, Hasbro? Still, this has to be the only element of the robot mode I actually find fun. Hell, this is overall the only element of the figure I feel is done to a satisfactory level. Everything else is just a shit show. Finally, yay, hollow legs, big whoop. Normally I'd be able to forgive something like this, but this just goes too far. Firstly, it's less of a leg and more low-level scaffolding. There's hollowness from practically every single angle, including the front. So much of the cost was cut here, all to facilitate that gimmick. It doesn't matter how good a gimmick is, it is never worth it if this is the result. And secondly, it's a f***ing leader class figure. That kind of hollowness on a figure this big is an absolute no-go. When even Earthrise Double Dealer does a better job, you know several poor decisions were made.
But don't worry, Double Dealer, your time will come.
Now, accessory-wise, again, you get the pretty shitty Forge of Solus Prime. You can kind of hold it in his awfully spindly hands that definitely aren't befitting of an Autobot commander, but I don't know, at this point, it's too little too late. I guess I'm glad it pegs into the back, but oh no, the back is painted, which means you're going to get paint chipping. Gee, great idea. Wouldn't be surprised if the paint also caused stress marks on the hammer. He also comes with a gun, but I've lost it, and at this point, I don't care. This robot mode hasn't given me anything to enjoy aside from the gimmick, which ends up causing way more problems than it's worth. The colors seem way too boring despite an awesome source material. The sculpted detail really isn't that great, despite being from a line known for its snazzy line work. The engineering is pretty bad, despite coming from a really good original figure, supposedly. And beyond that, it's just a boring robot mode. There's nothing here that stands out. It feels like a filler piece. This feels like it has more in common with a Fans Toys mini-bot than it does with a Hasbro mainline piece. It's a generic robot mode that's attempting to be screen accurate without understanding the ideology behind the robot mode's design. Ultra Magnus is supposed to be an authoritative figure, especially in Transformers Prime. There's just no personality here, and compared to the rest of the line, that's pretty pathetic. I don't own that many Prime toys outside of the Cyberverse subline, no relation to the current show. Thanks a lot, trademark reusage, but I do know enough to understand that lacking personality is an oddity amongst the line. This isn't Ultra Magnus. This isn't a character from Prime. It's a faceless nobody, forever wandering the wastelands of mediocrity. Suppose I shouldn't prolong the inevitable. His articulation is underwhelming to say the least. It's definitely not enough for a figure of this stature. Even considering the gimmick, the lack of proper foot posability is a grave oversight. I realize this character is typically more stoic than most in the show, but that shouldn't be an excuse to skimp on articulation. Really, the only thing he has going for him is his size. He's decently sized, and I suppose in an A stance he'll look fine as a singular piece on a shelf, but put him next to any other bots and nope, he fails horribly. As far as I'm concerned, the figure doesn't just need to look good, he also needs to be solidly built, well articulated, well engineered, and have that extra level of pizzazz. I only say this because Transformers is typically at the highest level when it comes to action figures on the market. Many lines wish they had the level of quality we have. It's because of this that we need to remain vigilant in our criticism as Transformers reviewers. We cannot let figures of this quality remain uncriticized. That being said, what's the point of this review? This figure is 7 years old at this point, so why did I bother writing an over 3,900 word script? What point is there that could possibly make me choose this figure over a more recent one to analyze? Well, 2 points actually. First, at the end of the year, I typically catalog my collecting journey with the best and worst list, and reviewing those figures in advance definitely helps me save time in explaining why each figure is in the position it is. Ultra Magnus doesn't take the bottom spot, but believe me, he's far down enough that this video will help me in the future. And second, well, it's a part of my collecting journey. These videos aren't just me putting my thoughts out there. I see them as a time capsule for where I am in any given situation. I like to use these videos to capture moments within fandom public consciousness. What is this particular moment? My own stupidity. I didn't do my research. I didn't look at the reviews. I didn't even take a look at the product photos online. All I saw was a deal and jumped on it, when I should have taken the time to see if the figure was truly worth it. This video serves as a reminder to stay vigilant in the process of back collecting. And who knows, maybe this video will serve as a deterrent for anyone thinking of purchasing one in the future. Maybe someone won't make the same mistakes I did because of this particular video. If I've helped in any way, then this video means more than I've intended. But putting that aside, this figure sucks. The disappointing robot mode already puts this into a 2 out of 5, but that absolutely atrocious vehicle mode just pushes it down into the deepest, darkest recesses of figure shitness. The only positive thing I can say about this figure is now I have a newfound appreciation for the Voyager version, which I want to hunt down very quickly out of spite. If you see this on the aftermarket, don't buy it. If you see it for 20 bucks, don't buy it. If you see it from a friend who's trying to give it to you for free, maybe, but this isn't the kind of figure that I'd actively pay money for. If Plastic Addicts was still a thing, this toy would easily make the cut. Especially in the middle of a apocalypse, don't buy this piece of garbage. Save your money for something that you're going to enjoy much more. And hopefully in the process, Platinum will remain forgotten, mainly as a footnote in history, because by God, they have not earned a single ounce of their pedigree. Platinum, please, politely, f*** off from the history books.